So I started with chronic pain, and that happened. I fell off a horse when I was 10, and I had sort of months on and off of the pain coming and going, but mostly not being there. And then when I was 11, I just woke up one morning and I had knee pain, and it didn't go from there. And it started. That was sort of the start of a pain journey where I had knee pain, I had hip pain, very severe hip pain, lower back pain. Over the years, I then had pain in my sternum, I had pain in my shoulder, my elbows, used to get neck pain, foot pain. So over a long period of time, I ended up with lots of pain. And then in my 20s, I was also diagnosed with ME as well. I also had a diagnosis of fibromyalgia, and then I also had a diagnosis of POTS, which is some heart issues. So lots of different symptoms, lots of different issues, and now I've got no symptoms at all, and everything has gone basically.
Can you tell me about what method that you use to find your resolution?
Yeah, so I mean, it was 25 years from when my symptoms started to when they went away. And obviously in that time, I mean, there were some years where the symptoms were a lot better and a lot more manageable, and some years where it was very severe. So because it was such a long time, I thought everything, and I had tried pain management clinics and sort of inpatient pain management programs where they'd sort of taught all sorts of body things, but nothing had actually got rid of the symptoms. And I also had a lot of very invasive medical procedures as well. So I had like facet joint denervations done, and I had epidurals, and I had all sorts of different like nerve blocks, all sorts of things that were tried. So none of that helped. And it was really, I stumbled on a website, and that was basically talking about the mind-body connection, but in a way that I had never explored it before. And I'd been told, that sometimes pain and symptoms can stick around when there's no damage anymore. And it's almost like the brain is making a mistake. But nobody had sort of said to me, what there is beyond that you can actually do to make the symptoms go away. And nobody had explained that there are ways you can calm your nervous system down, and there are ways you can interpret your symptoms as your nervous system trying to communicate to you that maybe it's not safe. And so this website that I found in late 2018, this was the first time that somebody had gone through all these steps and said, these are the specific techniques that you can use, and you can actually make the symptoms go away. So it was the most detailed program, and really it came up. I was on social media, and I was just getting advertisements by this website, and it was I'd looked at it originally, and I'd actually said, that's not going to help me, because I thought, having gone through all these other programs, that this was not going to be the answer. And it was really, I was getting desperate, and I kept seeing testimonials for this website saying, you really need to have another look at this, you really need to be open to looking at it. And so I clicked on it, and I thought, I might as well do it, and I might as well give it my all, just to make sure, just I can rule it out then, and if it's not going to work, at least I know I tried. But that was it. All my symptoms went away, basically.
In your understanding, how does the method Curable work?
So, yeah, when I think about, how does Curable work? I mean, it's now nearly 5 years since I've done it, so it's become, it's something that I've talked to about with a lot of people. But I think that they do a really good job of explaining pain science, and a lot of it is just learning about how pain works and how the brain works, and how pain is absolutely something that it can warn us of damage. Like if we fall over and we've broken our knee, then like obviously that pain is trying to say something to you, because you don't want to keep walking on it. You want to get you want to stop moving, and you want to rest and get medical care. But Curable is very much about teaching me about how sometimes the brain, especially if you've had maybe childhood trauma, or you've got a very sensitive personality, and lots of different things can kind of make this happen. But basically the brain makes an error of judgment, and is trying to warn you that something's not right. And so the pain can continue after an injury. But it's teaching you to spot that that it might not be the case there's something wrong, but you might just have to put your attention on something else in life, and it could be as simple as something's not right in your environment. You've had an argument with somebody, you're feeling stressed in the moment, or you're working too hard. But it can be that, I mean, particularly if you had some childhood trauma, it might be that your brain is just very oversensitive to kind of wanting to say I'm not safe. And it might be that you need to look back and you need to look at the original trauma and then work on, actually building a sense of safety in yourself. But I think it's one of those things that's really hard to explain, and it always sounds a bit unbelievable, really. And I think we're not very good at looking at the sort of the connection between the mind and the body, but it's absolutely there, and it's a very sophisticated and mechanism, really, to sort of get you to make sure that you're staying safe. And really, the biggest thing for me to learn was that actually, I sort of thought at the beginning, well, why am I in severe pain and there's nothing wrong with me, and is my brain basically betraying me? But actually, no, it's about learning that no, my brain's trying to keep me safe, and it's trying to do its best in this really overwhelming environment. There's so many sort of things nowadays. There's sort of work stress, and there's traffic, and there's lots of people that you come into contact with, and there's all these financial pressures and all these things. But actually, in the middle of it all, your brain is trying to look after you and stop you from coming to harm in any way, really.
I really like that description, that the brain is here to help us rather than to chastise us, to tell us we're doing something wrong.
Yeah, and I think when a lot of people come across these ideas, they do feel let down by their own brain, and they feel ashamed, and they feel a sense of, well, why am I in pain if there's nothing wrong, and am I going mad, kind of thing. It is that sense of like, well, why do I have a body that's doing this and other people aren't feeling like this? But I really think now, I see people getting frustrated as well when they're doing the early part of this work, and they keep getting symptoms, and they get really angry, and they almost want to tell themselves they're stupid because they don't need to be in pain. But actually, it really is about kind of learning to have respect for your brain trying to do its best to take care of you. And actually, I try to do it, like I try to have a kind of conversation with my own brain and say, okay, you're trying to let me know I'm not okay, but actually I can tell you I am, and actually, you don't need to try and protect me in this way. And I think that was a really good thing to do in the early days, to sort of just kind of start a dialogue and reassure myself, I guess. But it's trying so hard to look after us, really, and it's an amazing thing when you think about it.
I really like how you're describing it, sort of moving from an area of dislike of your own self, of the your body's doing something, why is it doing it, to moving beyond that, to listening to it and having a dialogue with your symptoms rather than against them.
And I think it's a really crucial part of it. I think one of the things I was taught early on is that any kind of frustration with yourself, actually, when you think about it, what your brain is then getting the message of is that I'm not safe all over again. Frustration and anxiety and anger, it's all sort of a loop coming back of telling your brain that things are not okay. So it can end up producing more symptoms. And I think I struggled with that initially because it sort of felt like, well, surely it's not that sensitive, but it really is. And actually, early on, one of the things I kept practicing was any frustration, like spotting it in my body and trying to address it. And I used to just over and over say to myself, I know this is frustrating, and I'm trying really hard, and I'm really worried my symptoms aren't going to go. But actually, just practicing reassuring myself and saying, okay, I'm going to park that frustration and deal with it later. If the symptoms don't go, I can feel it later on. But I'm going to just really keep making sure I'm feeling calm and I'm feeling safe and I'm reassuring myself. And I just did a lot of trying to practice that. That took a lot of work initially. I don't have to do it now, but I did at the beginning. But it does it all, if you're getting frustrated with yourself. I mean, if a parent was getting very frustrated and very sort of saying to you, you're stupid and why are you doing this? You'd feel upset and you'd feel scared. And so it's constantly thinking about, what message am I giving myself? Am I reassuring myself, and am I giving myself a sense of safety, or am I winding myself up more and being horrible to myself, really?
How long did it take for you starting the online curable program before you saw a significant change in the symptoms?
I'd had 25 years of symptoms, and I didn't think realistically it was possible for me to get better. So I was very skeptical, but obviously I was working very, very hard at it. And really about, well, as soon as I started listening to all the lessons, I just, my mind was blown, and I thought, wow, this is so compassionate and it really resonates with me. And so really quickly I had this sense of, I think this is going to do something. But it was about a week in that I think I was starting to see changes, and that was quite frightening because I'd been ill for so long, and also it's very hard to sort of understand that maybe you haven't needed to have symptoms and it's something to do with your own brain that's generated them. So when I started noticing a change, I think I sort of wanted to put the brakes on. But by 3 weeks, I knew it was working. And even then I thought, well, I can't just be getting better after 3 weeks. And so I think I didn't want to acknowledge it. So I started, I think at the 3-week mark, I started setting myself a few challenges to say, well, if I can do this, and I'm not getting any crashing from that, and I'm not getting any pain, then I will have confidence in it. And I still, every time I did something and I could see it was all working, all these techniques were helping, I still had a sense of no, it's not guaranteed, and I might crash tomorrow. And it was really about 6 weeks before I had no choice. I had to say, well, I'm well and this has worked. And even then I was still getting days of symptoms coming up, and some mornings I was waking up feeling really unwell. But the difference was I could then sit there and use those techniques, and sometimes those symptoms would go away immediately. So I knew I had control suddenly. So from that point on, I was like, right, I think I can officially say this has worked. And I was right at the beginning of a journey because I had no fitness and I had no strength. I had no confidence in my body. So it took a long time. It wasn't an overnight thing of, I needed to rebuild everything. But knowing that understanding that these techniques and why they'd worked, it was a few weeks really.
Was there anything in your life that you had to change in order for your technique to work?
Yeah, so when I went through this process, I immediately thought there's going to be things I need to change, and partly, so I think that I was convinced that I was really in touch with my feelings before I did this. But there are certain things about these techniques that made me go, well, hang on, no, I need to really do some work on this. And so I think that's still ongoing. And I think that in some ways that's a lifelong thing. I don't think it's just something that, you can just go through this process and do a little bit, but I think it's always going to be something to be exploring. And I think that I realised that I'd been living with my family for a bit because of my health was just not good at that point. And I think it made me realise how, even if it was a big deal, I needed to get myself back being independent and kind of really figure out, what do I want? Who am I on my own? And I also had to go on this journey of like, who am I when I'm well, and what do I want? Like it'd been so long, like so much of my life was dominated by being ill. So I think it was this sense of, I really have to listen and I really have to take it. I don't want to get sucked into one way of living that isn't quite right. So there was a lot that I had to just start listening to myself more, I think, and relationships as well, that I think I realised were just provoking fear and discomfort. And it was suddenly I think before I'd kind of had people in my life that I really valued them, but it was maybe a bit tricky and I'd sort of not thought about that. And then suddenly I realised, well, no, because if actually I'm not feeling good about myself when I'm with them, it's actually really important to sort of say goodbye to those as well. So it's been a lot of change as well. So yeah, and just a sort of sense of I've had to totally sort of understand, like, feelings in the body are not, it's like if you've got pain, actually is it pain or is it something that you're not looking at in your life? And then that was a huge learning curve. So yeah.
Love that. You talked a little bit about working out who the well version of you was.
Yeah.
How did you? I don't think I have the right words for it. How did you discover who you were beyond the condition?
Yeah, I think I remember I was standing in the middle of a field. I was testing myself on this walk, and I kind of had to stop in the middle of this not very pretty field, and I had to do some of the exercises to kind of tell myself I was okay. And I think I had this moment of like, I'm going to be able to go roller skating. And I think that's something to do with having been a child when I was really well before, and I loved roller skating and I loved dancing and I loved swimming. And I think on standing there, it was this moment of like, well, maybe I could go skiing and maybe I could go hiking literally whenever I want, and maybe I could go on my bike again. And it was this moment of, I think everything hit me at one go, and it was things that I had enjoyed when I was a child. And I haven't been on roller skates yet because I don't want to break my ankle. I'm not 10 anymore, but I think I will. I'm going to at some point. But I think I did go back to what had I just enjoyed as a child, and I just had to think about, well, I just need to try everything. And I have tried a lot. I've tried, like, I went up in a hot air balloon and I hated that. That was really terrifying. So I'm not doing that anymore. But I thought actually the best way to rebuild my fitness was to walk. So I just thought, first of all, before I do anything, I'm just going to walk everywhere, because that's what I knew I was going to really enjoy, and I thought that's the best exercise. I knew walking was really good exercise, and I thought if I just do that, I'll start to get some muscle tone and I'll start to kind of figure things out. And I think it was just so overwhelming because it was so quick. It was that sense of like, well, I could literally, if there's all these things I haven't been able to do for so long, and I think I want to try all of them, and I started like thinking about what kind of career to go for was really overwhelming. It was really scary, and somebody actually said to me, "Oh, do this job, and there's this great job that you could do," and it was too much, and I had to give myself a bit of time. So I started volunteering, and I started going off in slightly the wrong direction, but I only learnt that because I was volunteering, and realised actually, no, I want to build a career around actually helping people and talking about these kind of things, because I'm so passionate about these ideas, and I think there's so many people that could be helped by them who don't know about them at the moment, and it's only by people like me actually talking about it that people find these ideas, and they're still not very well known. So now it's very much like this is my everything. This is my career, and this is something that I love to do, and I'm really excited about what I'm going to do with it. But it did take I think I did a lot of journaling, and I did a lot of thinking, and I did a lot of I had a friend who then recovered after me, and she and I did a lot of talking about, well, what could we do, and what would we like to do, and what's realistic. And so yeah, it was a long process. It took a lot of thought. So
if you could maybe just give a sort of brief list of the things that the methodologies that you tried that weren't successful.
So I tried a lot. So initially I had every scan going when I was in pain, and some doctors would say, oh, I found this in your spine, it's not straight, or I found this or that, but most doctors were saying, no, that's not causing your problems. So they started putting me into pain management programs, and that was really intensive physio and hydrotherapy, sometimes like 4 hours a day. And they were trying to give me therapy, and they were trying to give me this sort of education around the fact that just because you're in pain, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong. But I think they explained it really badly, because I was convinced, I was 11, 12, 13 years old, and all I could think was, if I'm in this much pain, there has to be something they're missing. And they were very unkind, and there was a real attitude of, well, this is just sort of you wanting attention, or you want to get out of school, or you're just wasting people's time. So it wasn't done in the right way anyway. But then they started on, I was going to all sorts of different doctors, and I started on more invasive treatments. So it was things like, well, we'll give you a nerve block and see if that works. And I had something called prolotherapy, which I don't know, most people don't have that. It's a series of injections to harden your ligaments, and because they saw that I was very hypermobile, so I was diagnosed with hypermobility syndrome. And I think the idea was that they stiffen the ligaments to kind of keep your joints in place, and I had lots and lots and lots of injections with that. Saw pain clinics, tried lots of different pain medications, and pretty much, some things work temporarily. And I know, the prolotherapy I had a 4 years where the pain wasn't anywhere near as bad, and it got me a lot more mobile, but then the pain came back, and then it didn't work the next time. And they were talking about a lot more invasive things, and they were talking much bigger surgeries. And actually I got to the point where I was having so many treatments, and it was each one I had, it was more and more traumatizing, and I wasn't getting better. And I decided to get to a point where I just thought, actually, I need to stop, because everything I go through, and I know now it was winding me up. It was so frightening. I was ending up in more and more pain eventually. In my 20s, the pain was absolutely horrific, and I was getting more and more disabled, and it didn't I couldn't work out, was this just progressing, and was I ever going to get better beyond that? Actually, when I stopped those procedures, the pain did ease off a little bit, because actually it was triggering so much fear. But nothing that I was trying was helping, and the only thing really that long term made a difference was kind of a lot of rest, a lot of pacing. And again, it was probably giving me a sense of safety and a sense of being more in control. But I was kind of lying in bed for days, and then feeling I could get up and do something, and then the pain would kick in again. So then I was lying in bed for days again, just to always try to get it back under control. And so spending a lot of time lying down and resting and not really doing very much. But it's all, I mean, I find it's so hard because there's certain things like these invasive procedures. I mean, they were so awful. I was in my early 20s or my late teens, and it was traumatic, and I had no care, and I had no sort of support, and it was terrifying. And so my pain got worse and worse. Well, I know now why, but I didn't understand that at the time. And actually, if I could have had this information, I didn't need to go through all of that really. So it's hard, but that's why it's important to talk, isn't it? Really. So, yeah.
What do you do when your symptoms give notion that they might want to return? How do you manage any memory of that?
Yeah, so occasionally I get symptoms here and there, but a tiny amount compared to what I used to, nothing like what it was. And it tends to be something like a stress headache, or maybe a day of I get really tired, but it's not quite normal tiredness, but it's not like what I used to have when I had the ME. And I think that I very much go back to curable, and I'm not using those exercises mostly on a daily basis now, but I will go back and I might do some journaling. I might look at what's triggered it. I have learnt, for me, quite a lot of the time I'm just overdoing it, and I'm just falling into maybe perfectionism and just trying to do too much. And quite a lot of the time, I just try to be kind to myself when I go and have a lie down. And I think there are some people who really say don't do that because you're reinforcing the idea that there's something wrong. But I think for me, I'm trying to be respectful of the fact that I had symptoms for a very, very long time, and my brain is very good at being tipped into kind of panicking. And I would rather say to myself, it's okay if you just need to go and have a lie down. It's fine. And sometimes even the healthiest of people go and have an afternoon nap. And so sometimes I will do that, and I might listen to a meditation while I'm doing it, or I might have a think about trying to reassure myself and say, okay, you've been working really hard, but you don't need to do the symptoms and you're fine. I might think back to some of the things I've done recently that show that I'm really healthy and I'm fine. But I think a lot of this work, it's about trying to really take care of yourself, and sometimes that's then okay to just go and have a sit down, or I might do something creative as well when I'm sitting down, and that's what's worked for me. And I think for some people they would do the absolute opposite, but that's where this is such an individual thing, and it's so important to do the thing that's right for you, I think.
You touched on the kindness. And
yeah.
I suppose no matter what each individual find is their resolution protocol, is that if you're doing it with love in mind, rather than, I shouldn't be feeling this, I shouldn't be feeling that, that's probably the...
I think it's very easy to get caught up without even realising it, punishing yourself or being frustrated again and saying, I shouldn't be feeling like this. And it's a bit like, well, I'm human, why shouldn't I? And life happens, there's stresses that come along, and having been well for 5 years, there's obviously been serious things that have happened that have been difficult to deal with, and there's been work stresses, and there's been life just isn't sort of, once you recover, that's it, it's all easy. So coming back to being kind and saying, I don't think you recover and that's it, you never think about this again. I think it's a bit of a gift in that it does nudge you sometimes to say, actually, am I being kind enough to myself? Am I listening to myself? Am I giving myself what I need? And it's fine. And actually, quite often for me, I might have a bit of a lie down, and then I'm absolutely fine. And I might go out and go to a dance class or go to see friends and carry on from there. And there's no other issues. It's just one 2 or 3 hour block where I've not felt so good. So yeah.
Why do you feel that ME came to you as opposed to other people that had a similar upbringing to you?
Yeah. So it's I think it's such an interesting question as to why did I end up with symptoms, and then some, people in my family didn't, but other people go through similar things and don't. And I think that it's not a straightforward answer. And I know partly it's definitely my temperament, and I'm a very sensitive person. I'm very much prone to perfectionism and prone to worrying. And I know that feeds into it. And I used to find anything to do with, people used to say to me, oh, well, Emmy only happens, people only get it when they're perfectionists. And it used to make me feel so angry, because I used to think, well, it's got nothing to do with my personality. And it's only because I've gone through this program that teaches so much about how perfectionism there's so many physical symptoms that can come up from it. People die early because of perfectionism. It's lethal, really. And I look at it from such a different perspective. I have a lot more compassion for myself, because actually perfectionism now and being sensitive, as they are positive qualities in the right context. And I think I constantly look at, well, am I being a perfectionist in this minute? And I need to be more relaxed. But I do think it's about accepting all of you and seeing the positives in it. But I just think that, I have seen sometimes where a stress has hit and I've got a really bad headache that night, maybe. And I think that I don't know that it's easy to really pin down why some people, there is that conversion, that there's that sort of, physical symptoms come up. And it is just something that some human beings live with, and it's something that can be managed, and it's a very common thing. I think it's such a human thing, really. And I think most people know what it's like to get a stress headache, or if they've got an exam, they get an upset stomach or butterflies in their stomach. That's seen as so normal, but for some reason we don't understand. We're not good at saying that for some people you get more severe symptoms and they stick around. And I don't know why we don't have that why it hasn't extended to that. But really, I think it is very human, and I think it's a very, very common problem, really. And I think more people have an issue with it than they know about it. It's just not part of our vocabulary, so we don't talk about it. So somebody will say, I had a really bad migraine over the weekend, but they have no idea. It just doesn't occur to them that it might have been, it might have been some kind of trigger that they could have then done something about it. It's just becomes normal that they've gone to bed and they've just lived with it for a couple of days, or they've taken medication. So I don't think I fully understand, but I do have a very strong sense of my own temperament. I think there were certain things that possibly certain traumas that happened to me that maybe didn't happen to anybody else in my family. So I was just unlucky that they happened outside of the house, and it was just a series of bad luck. But I do think I just have there's a very strong connection there, in terms of something will happen to me and I will have symptoms. And so I've absolutely got the tools to stop that now, but I seem really predisposed to that happening.
I want to know, from your opinion, what positive elements you think that you have that helped you come out of ME.
Yeah, so I think looking at the positives of perfectionism, I think there's times when in my life I've been able to channel that and maybe work in a really detailed way on something and work really hard, knowing that it's kind of a short-term thing. And I think I use that in my recovery, because when I started going through Curable, so I had done one or two other similar things that sort of touched on the mind-body connection, and I immediately wrote them off, and so I didn't really engage. And I tried bits of the exercise and just thought, no, it's not working for me. And I got to a point where I was so desperate. I was finding it was always negative to be living with symptoms, but it was getting really frightening, and I was really scared about things like my parents aging and what life was going to be like when they weren't around. And it would have been really, really tough, actually. And I think that there was this sense of, I want to make sure I've done this to the best of my ability. And I was able to say, right, I am going to do these exercises seriously. I'm going to do them properly. I'm going to make these exercises my world for the next few weeks. And I did. I blocked everything else out. I wasn't watching television or reading books, or I was either resting in bed or I was doing one of these exercises, and I was really trying to explore it properly. And that's what got me better. And I think that I would never say that if somebody doesn't recover that it's their fault, they've not tried hard enough. But I do see when people really go for it and they really commit to saying, I'm going to go really deep with this work, you do tend to see people getting better results with it, and it takes some hard work sometimes. So yeah.
Thank you, Fiona.